That's the view of the Canadian Police Association, at least the police chiefs. They like it. The Supreme Court ruling, though, does not please marijuana activists around the country. They were hoping for a new legal era for pot users. Tim Meehan is the communications director for an organization called Ontario Consumers for Safe Access to Recreational Cannabis, and he joins me in Toronto. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hi, Christopher.
Now, why are you concerned? Why are you upset about this ruling?
Well, it's unexplainable to me. It just seems that cannabis consumers are once again delegated to being second-class citizens. It doesn't take into account like very fine argument that David Malmo-Levine made about J.S. Mill's harm principle. Doesn't take into account that the government has been saying for almost 30 years that there needs to be a change in the law. It just says, well, the government is entitled to draw the law as it sees fit, and frankly, it's time cannabis consumers got tired of just waiting for the government to do it, and that's why I've told people to support Jack Layton and Canada's NDP in the upcoming federal election. He's the only candidate on record who supports legalization, as our Senate committee has recommended.
But that then is as it should be, is it not? I mean, it's not up to the court to make law. God knows they've been accused of judicial activism excessively in the last couple of years. All they're saying is the law as constituted is the law.
As Christopher, the judges have been thrown into an activist mode for the past, I think it's going on since '82 when the charter came in. They did the job on abortion. They did the job on, well, they haven't done it as a final word on same-sex marriage. All of these issues are, I mean, we see them as fundamental human rights issues, and we think that Parliament should be addressing these. Unfortunately, you have a very vocal conservative minority, and you have the police unions, such as Mr. Cannavino spoke in that piece, who have their own vested interest and want to maintain prohibition. And I have something to say to Mr. Cannavino. The parents that you talk to are not the parents that I talk to. I talk to parents that are very concerned about having their children going to unlicensed dealers and having a dealer serve them when they're under the legal age. So I think we both come at it from the same, we both want the same ends, but I think that the police associations have their own vested interest in this, and this is why I've asked people to support the NDP, and let's kill this law once and for all.
Let me ask you one more question in terms of the court. You mentioned a few other areas where the court was more activist. Do you have any sense as to why it wasn't activist the way you want it to be this time?
I think the court is growing tired of being delegated to the role of being an activist. I think on this issue, I mean, clearly the courts have spoken in favor of medical rights. Recreational rights are always going to be a second-class subject, according to most Canadians. However, I do think it's important, and I do think it's important to remember that a lot of medical users are also recreational users, and there is a lot of overlap. So I think courts are just tired of this hot potato. They did it last December when we were ready to go. We were ready to argue the case, and then the government said, oh, we're going to put in decrim. They put it off for another couple of months. And we'll see what Prime Minister Martin has to do now, see if he follows through on his promise to...
Well, in fact, we've heard a lot from him this week. I mean, all of these year-end interviews that have been going on for a week, it seems almost as long as a year, every one of them raises the question of marijuana use. And he is pretty clear on his position that young people, as he said, using a certain amount, and he wants that amount debated, should not have a criminal record. Why isn't that enough?
Because the amount keeps growing lower. The Senate I don't believe actually the Senate recommended a fixed amount. The original bill, C-38, was 30 grams, lowered in committee to 15. Now we see Mr. White from the Alliance and the new Conservative Party wanting 5 grams.
And that would mean if you have more than 5, you get charged and you get a record.
Yes, and this is the thing. I mean, 5 grams is, well, not a lot, but I mean, it's not a small amount either. I don't really think it should be their place to debate how much you should have. I think there should be a legal regulated market so we get rid of the whole trafficking issue, because that's why they're concerned about limits.
So you just said you wanted a debate.
Oh, I want a debate, of course. But we've had having this for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for some action on this. And we've exhausted the courts, and now we're going to move to the political arena.
So you said and you mentioned you're supporting Jack Layton. He believes in complete decriminalization, just an unregulated system. How would it work?
Actually, Christopher, he believes in legalization. Okay. Decriminalization is sort of a misnomer. Decriminalization means that certain criminal penalties are removed. However, under Paul Martin's bill, it means that the police do retain discretion to criminally charge people as a summary offense. That gives you a criminal record.
So what do you expect to see? I mean, the election is not for a while yet, maybe April, people are saying. I remember being in parts of Ontario over the summer watching kids light up in the backs of cafes. They thought it was all over. They assumed it was safe, clearly, for them to do that. Are we going to see more of that, or are people going to start going back under the covers for a while?
Well, as Alan Young said, he believes that now there's going to be a bit of a push on by police to exert their authority now that it's clear that they had part of the CDSA, Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, is constitutional. So I think for a while I would urge people, don't be flagrant, keep it in a private place, and cross your fingers, and let's hope that police have better things to do than going busting cafes, because there's about 8 cafes running now in Toronto, and there's not a lot of violence associated with them, unlike bars and that serve alcohol.
And just briefly, in terms of the association with Jack Layton and the NDP now, do you think you might end up being an anchor or a drag on their popularity as he tries to revive the NDP? A lot of people might say, oh, if that's who he's hanging around with?
I get that a lot, actually, and I'm actually supporting Alison Murden. I think you've spoken to her a couple times on the show. She's running for the candidacy in Burlington. She's seeking the nomination once after the new year. There is a bit of a stigma. We're trying to change that. I've chosen to work with people like Alison, people like Alan Young, Paul Burstein, Leora Shemish, Joe Newberg, people at the top of this agenda, people that are serious, people that are professional. And that's the image we want to portray. Many, many Canadians, even Prime Minister Paul Martin admitted to trying hash brownies. I think that's pretty hypocritical of him to tell other people that this is an activity he doesn't condone when he's participated in it in the past, regardless of how long before.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Christopher.
Bye-bye.